Hello viewers, this is Ben here again today, and we're looking at the HO scale General Electric U25C and U28C by Rivarossi. The prototype U25C was General Electric's first 6-axle road switcher, built in the mid-1960s for several American railroads. The Phase 1 U28C also has a similar car body to the Phase 3 U25C, with some minor differences. Rivarossi's models were released in 2014 for the U25C and 2016 for the U28C. The models feature a newly tooled shell, separately applied detail parts such as steps, grills, grab irons, air hoses, coupler cut lever, horns, windshield wipers, and more. Models with factory-equipped sound also include an ESU low sound select decoder, along with 8 lighting functions. Here we have the front end of the Louisville and Nashville U25C. This model features metal handrails, and I especially like the rail chain that they have installed at the front of the locomotive. The plate under the chain can also be lowered if you wish. On the fireman's side of the locomotive, we also have some see-through etched metal grills for the air intakes and radiator. The trucks of the locomotive are also nicely done, with separately applied detail parts such as speed recorders and brake cylinders. On the engineer's side of the locomotive, the detail is identical, with the exception of spinning bearing caps on some of the axles instead of the speed recorders. The front and rear of the locomotive has separately applied air hoses, coupler cut levers, and grab irons. Note that the steps of the locomotive are all etched metal parts, and they are very nicely done. Do note that the class lights do not function. The Rivarossi U25C and U28C has what I would like to call road number specific details. For example, here we have the 3 Burlington Northern U28Cs. These 3 locomotives may look similar, but they are actually cosmetically different. First, we have the Phase 1A U28C. This is unit number 5651, and you can tell that the unit itself has 2 emergency lights. This is because the locomotive used to be a Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy unit. You can also see that the handrail stanchions are flat. There are sunshades on this model, and also the horn, which is a Leslie S2M, is located behind the air tanks on the model. Next, we have BN5666, which is a Phase 1B unit of the U28C. The difference is that the handrails are now a pressed steel type handrail instead of the flat handrails found on the Phase 1A. You can see that this unit has a single emergency light. This is because this locomotive used to be owned by Northern Pacific, and it was handed down to Burlington Northern. You can also see that this locomotive has the Nathan P3 horn mounted on the cab of the locomotive. Also note that former MP units have a snowplow installed. Lastly, we have the Phase 1C U28C, which is Burlington Northern 5656. The main difference of the Phase 1C unit is that it now has a 2-piece windshield compared to the 1 piece of the older locomotives. Also note that this locomotive has 2 emergency lights because it is also a former CBQ unit. Note that this locomotive also has sunshields, and the horn is also a Leslie S2M and is located behind the air tanks of the locomotive. The model weighs in at 570 grams, which is a very heavy weight considering how short it is. In order to disassemble the locomotive, first, remove the coupler boxes at each end. Note that the pilot cover on the front of the locomotive must be removed along with the coupler boxes. This may take some force to get off. Then remove the 4 screws located near the corners of the fuel tank. After the 4 screws are removed, the shell should come off with some wiggling. Be aware that the rear light board may be stuck to the shell, so do not pull too hard or you will risk breaking some of the wires. If the light board is stuck, just pull it out with your finger and install it back onto the chassis. Here I am just showing you the shell by itself so you can take a look at all of the detail and features. The factory couplers on this model is not very reliable, so I suggest replacing them with KDs. It is a good idea to use KD 148 or 158 whisker couplers. If you are installing KDs, make sure that you are using a piece of styrene shim on the bottom of the coupler, or else the coupler will sag and the coupler height will be not correct. The shim can be made by drilling a 3mm hole into a 0.6mm thick sheet of styrene and then cutting it to size. The coupler height of the locomotive will be correct if you follow these instructions when installing them. The chassis of the locomotive includes a nice powerful motor with dual brass flywheels. This is one of the best motors that I've come across on HO scale locomotives. I don't know its name, but I usually refer to it as the 4-dimple motor because it has 4 dimples on its side. You will also find this motor on some older Atlas and Proto 2000 locomotives, along with current Walthers Proto locomotives. When using DCC, the drive runs at a minimum sustainable speed of 0.65 scale kilometers per hour or 0.4 scale miles per hour, which is very impressive. Above the motor is the motherboard of the locomotive, which is screwed onto the top half of the chassis. The motherboard carries a 21-pin ESU low sound select decoder. The model has a single 28mm speaker, which is located on the engineer's side behind the cab. If you remove the decoder, you will see the labeling for the outputs of the soldering pads on each end of the motherboard. There are some extra functions available, so I took this chance to install some cab lights. The front of the chassis has a control stand installed, along with lighting boards for the headlight, emergency light, and number boards. The wires are tucked behind black electrical tape. The back of the chassis also has wires going to the rear light board, along with some radiator details. The underbody has some molded-on piping detail. I've also removed one of the side frames so that you can see how the rotating bearings work. All of the wheel sets are slightly narrow according to the NMRA standards gauge, but hey, at least they're consistent. If you need to access the motor and transmission for maintenance, just remove the 2 screws at each end and lift off the top half of the chassis. Be sure to not rip out any of the motor or truck wires in the process. Here is a quick demo of the lighting and sound functions. Note that the cab interior light was installed by me, and it is not included in the locomotive out of the box. I like this locomotive for the use of real chains and various see-through metal parts. The rolling bearing caps are a first for an HO scale locomotive, and it is very impressive. The complaint I have for the model are the out-of-gauge wheels and the factory plastic couplers, which are basically junk, and the right height of the model is slightly high. I also think the handrails could have been made thinner and more realistic. Overall, I think this locomotive is one of the nicest models you can buy today in the HO scale plastic market. These locomotives are also currently selling for around $80 to $100 with sound on a popular auction site, which is very affordable considering that the ESU low sound decoder inside each locomotive already costs $80. Thanks for watching my review of the HO Rivarossi U25C and U28C locomotives. I will end the video with a quick run-by of the model.